Get out of my way. Get out of my way. Get out of my way. Get out of the way. Get out. Get out.
When a nation refuses to correct its past, history sends a witness. And today, that witness has come from a throne in North Africa. Tonight, I want you to listen carefully, because what is happening is no longer politics, no longer diplomacy, no longer negotiation. It is history itself calling Nigeria to judgment through the voice of a king, the king of Morocco. His Majesty Mohammed VI has stepped forward, not just as a ruler, but as a conscience for Africa, and in a move that has shocked leaders across the continent, he has demanded the release of Nnamdi Kanu, the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. But he did not come empty-handed. He came with a bargaining chip that could change the balance of global power. Rare earth materials, materials that can fuel modern technology, electronics, energy, and even military innovation. These are resources many world powers are fighting to control, and Morocco is one of the few African countries rich in them. Yet the king did not offer them to the United States, not to China, not to Europe, not to Arab League. He offered them to Nigeria, but on one condition: free Nnamdi Kanu. And in the moment he made that offer, the conversation changed. Because this is no longer about politics. This is about dignity. This is about justice. This is about a wound that Nigeria has never healed. A wound that the world has quietly watched for decades. And now, through this unexpected royal voice, that wound is being reopened before the eyes of Africa. The king did not speak like a man negotiating business. He spoke like a man delivering a verdict. In his own words, I want my name written in the history of African justice. I want to stand with a man the world tried to silence. I want it to be known that when others stayed quiet, I stood for conscience. And then he said the words that have shaken governments from Abuja to Addis Ababa. Nigeria does not deserve the Igbos. That is not a political statement. That is a historic accusation. And why did he say this? Because for over 50 years, Nigeria has enjoyed the labor, innovation, and intelligence of the Igbo people, but has never hailed the crime committed against them. A nation that benefits from a people while suppressing their voice stands guilty before history, whether it admits it or not. The king did not come to praise Nigeria. He came to expose its fear. And the truth is painful. If Nnamdi Kanu is released, it is not politics that will shake. History will shake, because his freedom will bring the world back to the table of 1967, back to the truth of what really happened during the Biafran War, back to the question Nigeria has spent half a century trying to bury. And that is why the Nigerian government is afraid, not of the man, but of the memory. Nigeria can jail a body, but it cannot jail the truth. That truth is now returning. Recently, the Sultan of Sokoto reminded the nation that no African country defeated the Igbos. It was a coalition of global powers: Britain, America, Russia, and their interests. Nigeria was not the victor. Nigeria was the battlefield. And the king of Morocco is now reinforcing that same forgotten truth through his actions, not by repeating the Sultan's words, but by demanding justice for the people who carried that sacrifice. Because a people who stood alone for 3 years, surrounded, starved, isolated, abandoned by allies, yet still refused to surrender until they ran out of everything but courage. Such a people were not defeated. They were overpowered. And there is a difference. Overpowered people rise again. Defeated people disappear. The Igbo nation did not disappear. Today, the world trades with them, learns from them, invests through them, builds through them. The Nigerian economy stands on their backbone. Innovation in Nigeria is carried by them. Real estate, medical breakthroughs, entrepreneurship, engineering. Everywhere you touch growth, you touch an Igbo hand. And yet Nigeria detains their voice. That is what the king meant when he said, Nigeria does not deserve the Igbos. He meant, you benefit from them, but you do not honor them. You live off their genius, but you refuse them justice. You take their excellence, but you deny them dignity. And here is where the shame comes in. For a foreign throne to defend an indigenous son is a moral humiliation for the Nigerian state, because it means another country sees value in the man his own government fears. Another country sees justice in his cause, while his own government sees threats. If Nigeria had confidence in its own story, it would not fear his voice. But the government fears him because his voice is a mirror, and Nigeria does not want to look at itself. The world knows that Biafra was not just a war, it was a wound, and wounds do not die when government stays silent. Wounds die when truth is faced. This is why the intervention of Morocco is different from every other statement ever made. This is not activists speaking. This is not a civil rights movement. This is not an Igbo politician or a sympathetic governor. This is a king, a sovereign, a voice that carries centuries of heritage and moral weight. And when a throne speaks, history listens. And whether Nigeria likes it or not, the world is now watching. The king is not asking quietly. He made a royal moral demand. He stood before the continent and said, Africa must protect its own sons. If Nnamdi Kanu falls, a part of Africa's conscience falls with him. These are not casual words. They are words aimed at history books. And this is where the Nigerian government now finds itself cornered. Not by force, not by democracy, not by protests, but by moral light. A government can silence critics, but cannot silence history. A government can seize microphones, but cannot seize memory. And in that moment, Nigeria's greatest fear has been revealed. Not secession, not protests, not referendum, exposure. Because once Kanu returns to the world stage, the conversation will no longer be about agitation. It will be about truth. And truth is the one thing nations cannot negotiate away. This is also why the king's gift is not really economic. It is symbolic. Rare earth materials are the battleground of the future. They power electric cars, aircraft systems, defense technology, batteries, satellites, AI systems, drones. Whoever controls rare earth controls revelage. And Morocco is saying, we are willing to empower you, but only if you prove you still have a conscience. That is not a trade deal. That is a test. And right now, Nigeria is failing that test before Africa. For the first time since the Biafran War, the narrative is no longer, why is Nnamdi Kanu fighting? The narrative have changed to, why is Nigeria afraid of his freedom? And this is a question the government will struggle to answer without opening the pages it has tried to bury. Tinubu himself has now become part of this unfolding drama because he is the man holding the key. And the world is watching to see whether he will choose justice or pride. The king is not just calling for one man's release. He is calling for a nation to confront its truths. And truth has patience, but it also has memory. If Nigeria rejects this call, Africa will not forget. If Nigeria accepts this call, history will shift. Either way, the silence has ended. Ladies and gentlemen, we are standing inside a historic moment. A king has entered the battlefield of memory, and the conscience of Africa is watching to see what Nigeria will do. Because if a nation refuses to heal the wound it created, that wound will one day rise and speak. And tonight, that voice has begun to speak again. Not from the east, not from a protest ground, not from exile, but from a throne. Nigeria is now standing before history, and history does not forget.